continuing this special show on our next guest, he's a 21-year-old Aurora native who continues to fight his addiction with heroin. So please welcome right now Cody Lewis. Hi, Cody.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you. I'm great. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
Yeah, thanks for being here, and congratulations on being sober now for 7 months. Is this the longest you've been sober?
Yes, except for one time when I was 17, I went to rehab for 8.5 months. I was sober that time, but this is my first time sober for 7 months off heroin.
Okay.
Are you, now that you're sober, how are you seeing this differently than the first time you were through rehab?
You know, I'd like to say the first few times I went to rehab, I wasn't necessarily ready to stop using drugs.
What makes you ready now?
Well, this last time I can still remember the date, April 24th, a friend of mine passed away.
Last year?
Yes. And 2 of my friends that were with him got charged for drug-induced homicide. And they were very, very close friends of mine. You know, I would use with them every day, but I knew one of them, you know, middle school, elementary school even. So it was like 4 days after that I made the decision to, you know, get clean, and I think that really drove me, you know, and gave me the motivation to turn away from the drugs.
Well, let's go back. Let's talk about what drove you to start. When did you first start using?
I started smoking marijuana at 12 years old.
How old?
12.
Okay.
And how did you get it? Who gave it to you?
I knew a friend that had smoked, and, you know, I said, hey, I want to try smoking some weed, and someone else had it, and he got it, and I smoked it.
Were you going through something at the time? Like, were you having a hard time at school, or
yes.
Maybe life wasn't?
School, you know, since like a 3rd grade, I hadn't been doing so well. I'm maybe a C/D student, you know. And during that time that I was smoking marijuana that I started, my parents were going through a really bad divorce. You know, I wasn't handling that well. I'd wake up in the morning and they're yelling and screaming at each other. My grandmother dies a few months after that. And then a year or so after that, my grandfather dies of alcohol addiction. So,
So you'd say there was no one really looking after you at that age, and so you were looking after yourself and numbing it with the drugs?
Yes. I mean, I was put on prescription, you know, antidepressants and ADHD medicine and anti-anxiety medicine.
How old were you when that happened?
12.
12. Really? Yeah. So the marijuana, the antidepressant drugs, depressants, and then when did you graduate to heroin?
18.
18. So from 12 to 18, your drug of choice was just marijuana?
No, I had tried every drug out there, really, except for PCP and methamphetamine.
Where were you getting it from? Where did you get the money?
A lot of the time when I first started, you know, my parents would give me money every once in a while, but once they knew, you know, that I was using drugs, they would cut that off. Okay. Then I started selling stuff, you know, in my house, anything I could, you know, to get money for it.
So we were talking earlier about this, the heroin highway, the Eisenhower, and you were coming down using that as well, right? To come down to buy not only for yourself, but also to sell?
Oh, yeah. Every day at one point, once I really turned, you know, I was injecting heroin every day, $100 to $200 worth of heroin a day.
A day?
Yes. Yeah, I know, it was really bad, but sometimes I would come down 290, 1, 2, 3 times a day. You know, my day would consist of waking up, being in withdrawal, trying to find money, stealing it, getting it however I could, and then driving out to the city.
Were you addicted and hooked from the first time you tried heroin? Was it immediate?
I would like to say so, yes. The first time, I was addicted to cocaine prior to heroin, and, you know, someone had it and said, hey, you know, would you like to try it? My image of a heroin addict was, you know, a homeless person, 60s and 70s type, you know, you gotta shoot it up, and he told me, no, you can snort it. So instantly, you know, I was already snorting drugs, so
it's no big deal. You said, yeah, I'll try it.
Exactly. From that first time, there was like all that drug experimentation I was doing. Heroin was that one drug that took all those feelings away from me and took me out of reality.
Let's bring Jack Riley back into this for a moment from the DEA. How typical is this story?
Unfortunately, it's all too common, and we've seen it really increase in the last several years. But I do want to congratulate him. Keep rolling. You're doing great.
Cody, I just want you to maybe talk to the parents out there that don't think that this could ever happen to their kids, or that their kids aren't being tempted, or that there's no way that their kid could ever have this, massive addiction the way you did. What would you say to those parents?
I would like to say just, keep an eye on your kids, just because you're from the suburbs or you're from a good home, it's not always, these days there's not, addiction is everywhere. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, rich, or poor. Everyone can get addicted. You are susceptible to it. And I'd like to think that it's in my genetics, in my family. I know that. And if certain patterns, like Jack had said earlier, sleeping patterns, friends, even, anything that's just off from what you're used to, your kid's doing, they could be using some sort of drugs, may not be addicted yet, but I can promise you if they continue, they will become addicted.
Right. Cody, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story, and all the best to you. We're rooting for you.
Thank
all right?
you.
Okay. Coming up next, a man who went to hell and back and has now dedicated his life to helping those coping with addiction. We'll be right back. You're great.
Thank you.